Shabbos Perek Mishnah Aleph Bama Behema Yoytze Bama Eino Yoytze. The Torah asks the owner of an animal to let it perform any malacha on Shabbos. It's called Shvisas Behemtoi. And besides for that, one may let his animal graze on Shabbos, even though it's going to be over on Koitzer, because it's the way L'man Yanuach. The animal rests by eating until we have to allow our animals to eat. Okay, so Bama Behema Yoytze. Therefore, one may not allow his animal to go outside on Shabbos bearing a load, because it would thus be doing a malacha of Haitzah. However, articles that are needed to protect the animal or to keep it under control are not considered a masa, something that you would carry, and one may allow his animal to go outside with them on Shabbos. So the Mishnah is going to give a list of different zachin that an animal would use. A camel may go out with a leash tied around its mouth, meaning a leash or a halter tied to a camel's mouth to keep it under control. Therefore, a camel is allowed outside with it on Shabbos. A white female camel with a nose ring. A white female camel is harder to control than other camels because it has a greater tendency to flee. Therefore, its leash is not merely tied around its mouth, but is attached to a metal ring inserted into its nose. Since its nose ring and leash are needed for its control, it may go out on Shabbos wearing them. This type of camel is permitted to go out only with a leash attached to a nose ring, and not with one merely tied to its mouth, since it cannot be effectively restrained with a leash tied to its mouth. The leash is considered a burden in its case. A masa. The Gemara discusses whether an ordinary camel may go out with a leash inserted in its nose ring, which is more than it requires. On the one hand, since it controls the animal, it should be mutter, but on the other hand, since it's a stronger restraint than necessary, perhaps it would be considered a masa. Veludikis paprumbia, a Libyan donkey with a bridle. A bridle is a form of headgear that's used to control an animal. It consists of straps to which a bit, which is a metal piece held in the mouth, and reins are attached. Donkeys from Libya are more powerful than other donkeys, and they're much more wild, so that you need a lot more tools to control them, so to speak. So that's why on Shabbos it's mutter to go outside with a prumbia. However, a luvdikis may not be let out with a simple leash or even a leash attached to its nose ring because it doesn't suffice to control it. Besus basher, and a horse with a collar. V'chol balei hasher yotzim b'sher, and all the animals that wear a collar, such as hunting dogs or other animals, may go outside with the leash of the collar wrapped around its neck. The owner may allow his animal outside with this collar even if he doesn't hold the leash in his hands. The leash are wrapped around the animal's neck. So if the animal tries to run away, he can grab the collar of the leash to restrain it. Since the collar and the leash can be used in this way to control the animal, it's not considered a masa. Bashir, or an animal that's pulled with the leash of a collar, each of these items serves to restrain the animal in which it's mentioned. So it's not considered a masa, so the animal may go into Rishus Rabbim wearing these zachin. We may sprinkle the mechatas on it and immerse them in the mikveh even when they're still in their place on the animal's neck. Now what's the issue over here? The Mishnah teaches that if an animal's collar became tamei from a maze, one does not need to remove it from the animal's neck to sprinkle it with mechatas. Rather, one may sprinkle the collar when it's still on the animal. And we're not concerned that the water might be sprinkled directly onto the animal, which would then make the water, the rest of the mechatas that's on the ezayf, unfit for the tara process. And the same is true if the animal, if it became tamei, you don't need to take it off the neck in order to be matarit. One may simply lead the animal into the mikvah until the collar submerges in the water. We're not worried that the collar might be too tight for the water to reach it underneath it. Mishnah Beis, Chamar Yoytze b'mardas. A donkey may go outside on Shabbos wearing a saddlecloth for warmth, as long as it was tied to the donkey before Shabbos. Donkeys tend to feel cold at all times, so to keep a donkey warm, a saddlecloth would be put on his back and left there the entire day. Since the donkey needs it for warmth, it's not a burden, but it's not a masa, it is a malbush. Zecharim Yotzin Levuvin. Rams, which are male sheep, may go outside with their reproductive organs covered in a heart-shaped leather pouch. What is this for? The pouch serves to prevent weakness caused by excessive mating. As such, it's a protective item which an animal may wear outside on Shabbos. The word levuvin comes from the word lave. Okay? Use, EWE, Female sheep may go outside with their tails held up to expose their reproductive organs, or with their tails tied down to cover that area, or with their bodies covered in a garment to keep their wool clean. On the day a ewe is born and its fleece is perfectly clean, the fleece is the wool, a garment is tied around it to protect it from becoming soiled. True rice, goats may go outside with their udders wrapped tightly to stop them from producing milk, or loosely a bag is attached so it can catch the dripping milk. Rabbi Yossi asks animals going out with all of these zachin except for the ewes covered in a garment to keep their wool clean. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yossi, all the items listed above are considered a masa, with the exception of the beged of kavunais. That's the garment that's wrapped around the ewe to keep its wool clean. This is considered an article of clothing which may be worn outside on Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi certainly agreed that a donkey's saddlecloth is mutter, since it's a garment that keeps the donkey warm. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Izim yaitses truis liyabesh." Goats may go outside with their udders wrapped tightly to dry them out, avalei lechalav, but not with a bag attached to them to catch the milk. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Tanna Kama that every item mentioned earlier is not considered a masa. Nevertheless, he asks a goat to be allowed out with the bag attached to its udders to catch the dripping milk, because it might fall off and be carried by a person. Daladamis per shusar rabim. That was b'ama behemi yoytze. Now Mishnah Gimel is b'ama einu yoytze. With what may an animal not go outside? Lo yoytze gama bim to tell us. A camel may not go outside with a tag tied to its tail. Tag tied to its tail. Now what's this for? A tag is not considered hamasa, since it's a necessary accessory and normally worn by the animal, I guess, to identify what this is for. L'simin l'davar acher, the Rab says, because it might fall off and be carried by a person. Daladamis b'shus rabim. Le'okod v'le'rogel. Nor may it go out with its forelegs attached to its hind legs, or with a leg tied in a bent position to keep it from running away, because when you tie up the legs of the animal this way, it causes the animal pain, and that would be considered a masa. For example, you would tie the front legs to the back legs, leaving it enough slack to walk, but not to run. The front leg, or what they would do is sometimes they would bend the front leg backwards on one of its joints, and the lower part of the leg is tied to the upper part, so it only has 3 legs to walk on. And the same is true for all other animals. They too may not go out wearing a tag or with their legs tied in these ways. One may not tie camels together in a line, one behind the other, and pull the one in front, because a person who leads a single file procession of camels appears to be taking them to be sold, which is prohibited on Shabbos, because it looks like you're heilich lechinga, it looks like you're heilich l'shuk to sell them. However, he may gather all the ropes together in his hand and pull them as a bunch. But at the end of the rope may not dangle more than a tefach from his hands, because then it looks like he's carrying. So you can't do haitzah that way. Provided that he doesn't wind the ropes of wool and linen together around his hand, because that would be isser because of shatness. It's a different isser. The Torah asks wearing or even getting warmth from shatness. Therefore, even on a weekday, one may not wind his hand with the ropes of wool and linen from the camels. It's something to do with Shabbos. It's Alamol's problem. Mishnah Dalet. Ein chamor yotze b'mardas b'zman she'ein kshura loy. A donkey may not go outside on Shabbos wearing a saddlecloth if it's not tied to the donkey before Shabbos. Not that it's not tied. It has to be that it was tied before Shabbos. V'loy bezug. Nor can it go out with the belt suspended from its neck. So it's either a problem of hashmas koil, making sound on Shabbos, even if the bell is stuffed with cloth and it cannot ring, it's usher because there's an appearance of maris ayin. Alpha pishu pakuk, even if it's stuffed with cloth that keep it from ringing, it's a problem of maris ayin. Nor with a ladder-like brace on its neck to keep it from turning its head around and scratching itself. If an animal has an irritating wound on its leg or its neck, the owner would fasten a brace of wood to its neck to prevent it from turning its head to scratch the wound. This brace is called a sulam because it has a wooden frame that resembles the ladder. Although this brace is needed to protect the animal, and so it's not considered a masa, it's also because it's very hard to attach this properly, and it might fall off, and a person might carry it on Rishus Haram. And nor may it go out with a protective strap on its leg. If the animal's feet knock against each other, the owner would tie thick leather straps around the place of contact to prevent injury. And chickens may not go outside wearing strings for identification or straps on their legs for restraint. Rams may not go outside with a miniature wagon under their tail, which protects the tail. Rams have long, wide tails. In order to protect the ram's tails from being damaged by rocks or stones on the ground, one would attach a little wagon to hold it up a little bit so it would prevent the tail from coming in contact with the ground. Ewes may not go outside with chips of yachanun wood in their nose. What's yachanun? One would insert a chip of a type of wood known as yachanun into the nostrils of a ewe to make it sneeze and dislodge the worms in its head. Only ewes were treated this manner because rams did not need this treatment because they butt heads with each other, and the butting of their heads would cause these worms to fall off their heads. The ein ha'egel yaitze begimain, a calf may not go outside with a yoke made of reeds, which is used to train it to bear a real yoke. A cow may not go outside with a porcupine hide on its udders to protect it from rodents, or with a strap stretched between its horns. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's cow will go out with a strap between its horns, but this was against the will of the Chachamim. The strap wasn't a malbush; it was just it was linoi. So that was aser. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, this decoration is not a masa because it was common for cows to wear them. Although the Mishnah calls it his cow, the Gemara explains that it did not belong to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, but it belonged to his neighbor. Since he wasn't moicha, since he didn't stop his neighbor from letting it out on Shabbos, wearing this ritzua, the strap, so the cow is considered as though it were his own. Ad kan perakei.